The year is 1815. Cannons still smoke across Europe after the fall of Napoleon. Armies limp home. Nations teeter on bankruptcy. But one family, just one, is not only untouched, they've emerged richer, stronger, and more deeply embedded in the machinery of power than ever before. This is the story of the Rothschilds. Not a royal bloodline, not a military dynasty, but a family of Jewish bankers who quietly became one of the most powerful forces in European history. They didn't wear crowns, but kings bowed to them. They didn't command armies, but they funded them. This is the real and often misunderstood legacy of the Rothschilds, the family that didn't just make money, they made modern capitalism. We begin in Frankfurt, 1744, a Jewish ghetto where residents lived under strict laws, often confined to certain trades, subject to heavy taxation and barred from land ownership. It's here that Meyer Amschel Rothschild is born, not into privilege, but into constraint. Meyer was no ordinary child. He was bookish, fluent in Hebrew and German, and fascinated with coins, especially rare ones. He apprenticed with a banking house in Hanover, where he learned about currency exchange, credit instruments, and the economic power of trust. By his 20s, he returned to Frankfurt and began trading in rare coins and antiquities. This brought him into the orbit of Crown Prince Wilhelm, one of the richest men in Europe. Meyer became his financial agent, helping manage vast fortunes discreetly and profitably. But Meyer wasn't just playing the short game. He had 5 sons, and in one of the most brilliant strategic moves in financial history, he sent them to key European capitals. Amschel stayed in Frankfurt to hold the central node. Nathan went to London, James to Paris, Karl to Naples, and Salomon to Vienna. This wasn't a scattering, but a calculated network. Each son built a financial stronghold, but they remained tightly coordinated. They shared intel, capital, and strategy. Imagine a decentralized banking operation with brothers exchanging encrypted letters, using private couriers and even carrier pigeons, decades before modern communication existed. The Napoleonic Wars gave the Rothschilds their first true test and their moment to rise. In an era where wars were often decided as much by money as by muskets, governments across Europe were desperate for loans. Central banks were weak, tax bases were unstable, and gold was king. And the Rothschilds could move it faster and more discreetly than anyone else. They financed Britain, Austria, Prussia, often simultaneously. Did they fund both sides of the same war? That is a popular rumor. But there's little historical evidence that they actively played both sides of a conflict for profit. They mostly aligned with Britain and its allies against Napoleon. And then there's the legend of Waterloo. The story goes like this. Nathan Rothschild, head of the London branch, received early word of Napoleon's defeat in 1815, thanks to his private courier network. Allegedly, he rushed to the London Stock Exchange and began selling British bonds, triggering panic as others believed that Britain had lost. Then, just as prices collapsed, he bought everything back, raking in a massive fortune when the truth emerged. By the end of the Napoleonic Wars, the Rothschilds were Europe's dominant financiers, with a reputation for reliability, discretion, and speed that no rival could match. By the mid-19th century, the Rothschild name was synonymous with global finance. In Austria, they helped stabilize the Habsburg Empire. In Britain, they funded the government's purchase of a 44% stake in the Suez Canal in 1875, securing a vital route to India. In France, they bankrolled railroads, mining operations, and infrastructure. In Italy, they supported nationalist movements and sovereign finance. They became the first truly international bank long before JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs. What made them unique was how they operated as a network of equals, not a top-down empire. They exchanged letters coded in Hebrew Yiddish script, discussed geopolitical shifts, gold movements, and investment strategy across borders before telegraphs or phones existed. Their wealth wasn't just in gold or stock, it was in access. They could pick up a pen and write to a prime minister, a pope, or a monarch and get an answer in days. They weren't just financiers, they were diplomats without flags. Yet, despite all this, the Rothschilds never sought political office or military power. Their game was more subtle and arguably more enduring. The Rothschilds' power wasn't just financial, it was psychological as well. Because they were private, Jewish, and immensely wealthy, they became targets of rumor, resentment, and conspiracy. In the 19th century, as nationalism and anti-Semitism surged, they were painted in far-right and far-left propaganda alike as puppet masters behind wars, manipulators of the world economy, and architects of revolutions or coups. Even today, their name is invoked in baseless conspiracy theories, along with strong anti-Semitic undercurrents. Let's be clear, there is no credible evidence that the Rothschilds controlled the world's central banks, manipulate global weather, or pull the strings of governments. Their influence was real, but it was economic, not omnipotent. They gave loans, they advised governments, they placed bets on emerging markets, but they didn't run the world. So why the obsession? Because the Rothschilds were one of the few Jewish families in history to rise to such heights of wealth and influence, and they did it without titles, armies, or royal blood. For centuries, that defied the power structure, and to some, that was intolerable. By the 20th century, the Rothschild empire began to fragment. The two world wars devastated European markets. Communism wiped out their operations in Eastern Europe. Death duties and inheritance taxes shrunk family fortunes. The rise of national central banks and corporate mega banks replaced private family banking as the dominant force in global finance. Yet, they adapted. Today, the main financial arm is Rothschild & Co., based in Paris and London. It handles mergers and acquisitions, wealth management, sovereign advising. They're not in the headlines, but they're still advising presidents, CEOs, and billion-dollar deals from behind the curtains. The family no longer acts as one unit. Their fortune is spread across dozens of branches and trusts, and their combined wealth is estimated in the low tens of billions. Wealthy, yes, but not at the scale of the world's top dynasties today, like the Saudis, Waltons, or modern-day tech giants. Their greatest power now lies in legacy, reputation, and discretion. The Rothschilds didn't invent capitalism, but they mastered its early mechanics: credit, speed, risk, and trust better than anyone else. They became synonymous with international finance, not because they sought power, but because they understood how money moved across borders and how information could outgun armies. Their influence has now waned, but the legacy remains. The multinational bank? Rothschilds did it first. Global financial coordination? They pioneered it. Political influence without political office? They mastered it. They weren't kings, they weren't conquerors, but they built a dynasty that outlasted empires. And even now, in the quiet boardrooms of global finance, the name Rothschild still means one thing: power earned in silence.